President Joe Biden and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese have signed a historic climate deal on the sidelines of the G7 summit. The pact will see the countries work together to develop solar, wind, storage technology and hydrogen markets, to name just a few. Anthony Albanese said the agreement signified the largest action by any country to tackle climate change and bolster clean energy investment. That means more of your tax dollars being invested in renewables, but will that see energy prices fall? Will it mean we have reliable, plentiful energy supply? The man to tell us the facts is energy expert and author of Fossil Future, Alex Epstein. Alex, thank you for your time. Joe Biden and Anthony Albanese have made climate concerns the third pillar of the Australia-US alliance, alongside defence and economic cooperation. And in fact, Alex, they say climate concerns will be the central pillar. Is that a good outcome for Australia?
I was just laughing because I was thinking, imagine these two guys got together and they announced that they were inventing a new phone or something like that. And not only were they inventing a new phone, but they were going to invent a new phone based on the most failed technologies deployed so far. Like, first of all, what do these guys know about phones? And second of all, why are you using the failed technologies? And so what they're using is solar and wind, which have caused problems all around the world because of their fundamental unreliability, which we don't have any kind of storage that's cheap enough to compensate for that. And they're talking about hydrogen, which is just a total subsidy dump. And so, as you said, it's basically them just saying, hey, we're going to take a bunch of your money and we're calling it like the greatest thing. But what does that mean? You're just going to take more of our money? It's like, I get excited about things in energy when somebody actually has a cost-effective alternative that they're willing to have compete on the market. Whereas this is not that. This is taking all our money. But the worst part of it is the whole net zero agenda is not just taking our money to finance really inefficient stuff. It's prohibiting us from using the most cost-effective sources of energy. That's already driven up prices around the world. And that's the really scary thing. Not the money they're going to steal, but the freedom they're going to take away to use the best forms of energy.
Well, investing in reliable forms of energy, nuclear would be one, but our energy minister has come under fire recently for an embarrassing lack of knowledge on nuclear energy and modular reactors. A video posted by the energy minister, Chris Bowen, featured images of yellow barrels with radiation symbols, imagery from some activist video. And it also pushed the notion that nuclear power is just simply too expensive. What's your response to that, Alex?
I would say everyone has to watch this video, although maybe that'll help him in some way. But I mean, this video is this guy is a piece of work. Every time I see him speak, I have the thought, well, like, this guy definitely shouldn't be anywhere in a position of power. And then I'm reminded, oh, wait, he's like the head of energy in Australia. So his whole thing is, like, one of his things is nuclear is too expensive. Like, that's one of his central things. And he totally evades the fact that it's policies like Australia's anti-nuclear policy that makes it expensive. So I call this the Tanya Harding case against nuclear, right? Where you cripple something and then you say, hey, why can't you compete? Why can't Nancy Kerrigan compete, right? Why can't nuclear compete? It's like, it has a track record of being cost effective when it's not being crippled. He had a whole bunch of other things about, like, oh, how can you deal with the waste? And like, nuclear has less waste than anything else. We have good ways of dealing with it already. In the future, we'll be able to convert it to new fuel. So it's the most valuable form of waste and the least problematic form of waste in the world. And again, this is coming from somebody who's like, I'm Mr. Look, fossil future. I'm a huge advocate of fossil fuels, but I'm a huge advocate of anything that's cost effective. So I might be coming to Australia in the not too distant future. I don't want to insult this guy too much because I want to offer him the opportunity to get educated about the field that he's presiding over.
Oh, look, if you can educate Chris Bowen, you will be a national hero. I can't see that happening because I don't think he's even open to the discussion. He's not even open to receiving any sort of information that challenges his narratives. Now, I've got to ask you about the climate change hypocrites. A green energy boss who oversaw the introduction of Australia's first offshore wind farm has been accused of hypocrisy because when he found out a massive offshore wind farm was being planned near his holiday home, he objected to the plans. So It's interesting, isn't it, Alex? The people who are very happy to inflict these ugly eyesores all around the countryside, all around the shoreline, they don't want it near their properties, do they?
Yeah, but my usual line on hypocrisy is, look, I hate the consistent ones most of all, like the ones who want to live in a hut and force us to live in a hut, because they're the most nihilistic in a certain sense. But I think this kind of thing does reveal the elitism in the bad sense, where they really think of this as, hey, this is a way for me to control everyone else in the world and for me to be a big shot and for me to, quote, change the world. And they don't think at all through what this means concretely. And you can just see this obliviousness when it's like, this happened with the Kennedy family in the US. Like, oh, we don't want these ugly wind turbines. Oh, no, those are for other people. It's a similar thing with, oh, we're flying the private jets, and it's important for us to fly the private jets to tell you that you can't fly in a regular plane. Like, that's important. What we do is important. So you really see there's just a total lack of interest in just what a typical human being goes through and what they need. And that makes sense, because what they want to take away is fossil fuels, which makes it possible for a typical human being to have a good life, which was impossible before fossil fuels.
Now, Australian billionaire and green hydrogen enthusiast Tulye Forrest has hit out at the coal industry this week. He has said this on the Radio 2GB.
Short answer on this one: when will power bills come down?
Over this decade.
Over this decade.
Yeah, the more the renewable energy sector cuts in. I mean, you can't bitch and whinge about high power costs when you've got 78% coming from coal, mate.
What do you make of that? Is that why we've got high power costs?
Well, again, there's this Tanya Harding argument where it's like the people who are making coal more expensive are criticizing coal. Like, look, we had cheap coal power in Australia fairly recently. We've had cheap coal and natural gas around the world. What changed? Is it we ran out of coal? No, coal is almost limitless on Earth. Natural gas we have more of than ever in terms of what's accessible. So it's all about political restrictions. So and why are all of these reliability problems starting to happen around the world with the advent of restricting fossil fuels and having more solar and wind? Was this just a random coincidence? It's obviously not a random coincidence. What you're doing is you're suppressing the supply of reliable fossil fuel energy, so you're driving the price up, and then you're subsidizing unreliable, expensive, quote unquote, renewables, mainly solar and wind. And so then you're adding this giant subsidized pile of junk to the situation. Now, I'm all for solar and wind if they can compete on a real market, but that means they have to pay for their own storage, pay for their own backup. That's what they're not willing to do. So right now they're adding a huge amount of waste. That's why I used the word junk. And they're restricting the thing that supports them, which is fossil fuel. And so why not just go back to a policy of energy freedom where we're free to use anything, and then let's see how well coal can compete. If you can actually outcompete coal, great. But right now you're crippling coal and then forcing us to pay for this other stuff in addition.
Absolutely. Let the market decide. Stop subsidising one sector and punishing the other. Now, Alex, you recently tweeted a clarification about the myth of fossil fuel subsidies. You said in reality they are punished by the government, not given billions, even trillions, as some suggest, in subsidies. The IMF has a curious way of calculating these subsidies. Can you explain that to my audience, please?
Sure, definitely. If people want to check this out, I have a Substack, alexepstein.substack.com. It's at the top of that. You can access it for free. Yeah, so the IMF, it's just people hear monetary funds. They think, oh, they deal with money. They must be sophisticated. They're using numbers. Like they'll use 5.4 trillion or 5.9 trillion. And people are like, oh, well, I'm not going to argue with numbers. But one thing I point out is you look at their numbers, and a huge percentage of their number, a significant percentage, is basically traffic accidents. So they're calling fossil fuels subsidized because of traffic accidents, as if we didn't use fossil fuels, we wouldn't have traffic. Like, which in a sense is true, because if we didn't use fossil fuels, we wouldn't be able to afford to have traffic. But their whole argument is we don't need to use fossil fuels. So they're claiming once fossil fuels are unnecessary because we can drive without them. But then they hold fossil fuels responsible for all the deaths from driving. And what this just points to is that this is a scam. And as I show in that article on the myth of fossil fuel subsidies, it's just a total scam. And the thing you mentioned earlier is important. They totally ignore the massive punishments to the industries. They claim the industry has special privileges, even though destroying the industry is literally the most popular political goal in the world. Like, this is how insane this claim is, that they get, who thinks fossil fuels are getting favoritism right now? Like, honestly, if you look at what the world is doing, and you think solar and wind are some sort of victims, given they get all these special privileges. I mean, this is just, clown world is I guess the way to describe this these days.
Well, this is just whole-scale gaslighting, disinformation, fake news, whatever you want to call it. It is just so false. It's precisely the opposite of what's happening. As you said, we've had Joe Biden in America, Anthony Albanese in Australia get elected, promising, in Joe Biden's case, he was going to end coal. And yet, their governments are subsidising coal to the tune of billions, trillions globally. It just makes zero sense. But people put forward that argument, Alex, because when you keep hearing it, they presume it to be true.
Yeah, and I think I try to focus a lot. I have this website I mentioned, alexepstein.substack.com, also energytalkingpoints.com. I try to debunk all of these things, particularly that involve numbers, because people they think it's sophisticated, but usually you just look at these things and it makes no sense. Again, as you said, this is the most persecuted industry in the world. Everyone hates it and is trying to get off it. And yet people believe there's $6 trillion in subsidies. Like, GDP is about $100 trillion. You think like 6% of the world's GDP is just being funneled to these fossil fuel companies that everyone hates? Like, there's something. And why are they using it in Japan, right? Where there's no fossil fuel resource? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I think it's important to have both common sense and then to have all of the factual details. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my work, is just give everyone all the details so they can refute every aspect of the scam.
Alex Epstein, we always love speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Likewise. Thank you.